Hello, I'm Troy Abels from Hanford, California, and you are listening to Gospel Tangents.
Kate Kelly had a high-profile excommunication in 2014, and several other women were disciplined, losing their temple recommends, among other things. Is there a purge against ordained women? I asked that question to Bryndis Roberts, and we'll find out her answer. What does she think? Is the LDS Church out to get people in ordained women? Let's talk a little bit about your personally. How has this being in the leader? Are you still so you've been executive director for about 3 or 4 years now?
Chair of the executive board.
Okay, I keep forgetting the title. I apologize.
Yes, since April of 2016.
So you've been in there a lot longer than Kate was leading the charge.
I mean, I don't think that's an accurate comparison.
Okay.
Because again, we weren't organized to that way, and then so yeah, I have been chair of the executive board since April 2016.
Okay, so has there been a sort of a purge or anything with women who, especially with the executive board, as far as church discipline or losing temple recommends or anything like that?
I don't know if I would go so far as to call it a purge. I think as for some of us, as more and more questions were raised in our minds about things that the church was doing, or even the church's response to our request that the church do things differently or consider doing things differently, I think some women left the church as a result of those actions. For me, I was released from being Relief Society president in June of 2015, and in July of 2017, my temple recommend was taken away. Now, prior to, I'm trying to see the actions that I participated in prior to being released from being Relief Society president in 2015. My name was carried as a proxy in the second priesthood action, which would have been in, I think that would have been in April of 2014. Then in October of 2014, we had what we called a local priesthood action, where we encouraged people to try to go and get admitted into the priesthood meeting in their local areas. And I joined 2 other women in Georgia, and we went to one of their stake, the stake of one of those women, to try to the stake meeting house or wherever they were having the priesthood meeting, to try to get admitted into that meeting, and we were not allowed to join. We were turned away at the door. And but other women were allowed to come in, and people out in California, actually some places here in Utah. And I was trying to sort of draw a correlation, if there is any, between any actions that we had done and any changes in my status in the church. So as I said, I was released from being Relief Society president in June of 2015. So I don't really, we had done the local priesthood action in October of 2014. We did not do an action in April 2015, but we did do an action in April 2016. And that was the Ready to Witness action that I talked with you about, and we collected the letters and cards and any way women wanted to express themselves, really, and we stood outside of the church administration building. Well, we initially tried to deliver them to the church administration building, and we were rejected with the letters. And so we stood outside of the church administration building hoping and praying that someone would take the letters from us, and then we eventually wound up mailing them to the First Presidency, to the Relief Society Presidency, to the presiding bishop. We mailed several packets of them. And then in October of 2016, we again gathered at the church administration building. When we gathered there in April of 2016, we could walk up to the door, and the security guard would let us into the little, I guess, foyer area, but wouldn't let us into the building. However, by October, when we had our next action, the gates were actually closed. They were like gold, bronze, whatever color gates up there. And so we couldn't even go up to ring the bell to ask to go into the security. So each person that participated in that action walked up the steps of the church administration building and put a little sticky note up on the door of things that he or she wanted to say, and then we collected those afterwards and sent those to church leaders.
Okay, so, all right, wow. So let me just give you kind of my perception and tell me if you think this is a legitimate perception. After Kate was excommunicated, in my eyes, it seemed like the profile of Ordain Women went down. But it sounds like you were still doing actions. Was there a purposeful lowering of the profile, if you will, so that you wouldn't be quite as confrontational?
I don't accept that we were ever confrontational. I mean,
and I agree with you. But can you see that the brethren felt that Kate especially was confrontational?
I can't speak to what the brethren felt. Okay, certainly we have not had since April of 2014 an in-person action that had the amount of participation that the first two priesthood actions had. Part of that, I think there are a lot of reasons for that. Part of that is that the Mormon moment has passed, the Mormon moment that sort of grew out of Mitt Romney running for president and all of that. And then I think people were very hopeful before Kate was excommunicated. A lot of people were very hopeful. There had been signs, albeit small ones, from the church that perhaps church leaders were willing to listen and were willing to make some changes. I mean, the Let Women Pray campaign had been held, and a woman had actually prayed. I mean, we had at least somewhat of a history of seeing that our concerns had at least been listened to, and perhaps, although while our leaders might not be willing to acknowledge that there was a direct cause and effect between us raising our concerns and the change being made, changes had been made. So I think there was a hope, an expectation, a prayer that there would be a very different response from the church to the two priesthood actions. When the response of the church was when the response was to excommunicate Kate, I think a number of people did have to say, okay, maybe I was wrong about how the church is going to react to this. But I don't think it was so much fear that led people to maybe not be as much involved, or maybe it was more of a recognition or a change from having a hope that the church would change to recognizing, oh, they're digging their heels in, they're not going to change, and deciding that energies would be better spent elsewhere. So I reject the notion that women were filled with a spirit of fear. the women with whom I work are not fearful. They're brave. They're courageous. And so I don't think that there was ever a spirit of fear.
But it does sound like there was, for some women at least, a spirit of resignation that this isn't going to help.
I think there were for some women and for some men, but I think there was also maybe a regrouping and saying maybe we need to, that we will do actions that maybe won't put people in the limelight so much, but they will let the brethren know that people are still concerned and that we still have these questions. But I just reject and I bristle at the notion of thinking that a spirit of fear entered
Okay.
into the discussions.
Would it be fair to say that the enthusiasm has decreased since 2014?
I think that would be a fair statement, and I think part of that is not just the church's response to what Ordain Women has done, the exclusionary policy. I mean, the issuance of that was like a punch in the gut to many of us. The statements being made in General Conference that the church does not apologize. It was as if there was a digging in of the heels of church leadership, and I think for some people it's like my time can be, there's so many things that need to be addressed in the world. My time can be better spent addressing those things.
Okay.
And then I think also people begin to question the truthfulness or the validity of the church. So, if you no longer believe in the church, or you no longer have as much reason to advocate for change in the church. Though there are a substantial number of people who, although their faith journey may have taken them to places outside of the church, they still have ties to the church, and so they still work very hard because of those ties to the church.
Okay. Do you have a sense of, is it fair to say that the membership of Ordained Women was much higher than it is today?
No, that is not fair at all.
That is not fair. Oh.
No.
So has it stayed the same? Has it increased?
We have roughly the same. Well, we have steadily added more profiles, and so no, that is not a fair statement to say. I mean, I think because people do not see us in the New York Times, that maybe some people think that we have gone away, but we have not gone away.
So what do you see for the future of Ordained Women? You see this as still a viable option, and change will happen one day?
I believe change will happen one day. I firmly believe it's a Sam Cooke song, a change is going to come. Now, whether I will be privileged to still be around when that change comes, I don't know. I mean, I was thinking the other day of the words of Dr. King, and while I don't in any way compare myself to Dr. King, let me hasten to say that. But I think oftentimes when you work in movements, you have to realize that the change may not come at a time when you can benefit from the change or you can partake in the change. But that doesn't mean that it's not important for you to continue advocating for the change.
All right. Well, I know I need to let you go, so I just want to finish up with one last thought. Are you familiar with Sonia Johnson?
Yes.
Have you learned? Are there any lessons to be learned from Sonia?
I think there are lessons to be learned from both Sonia Johnson and the women in the September 6th. What I take as the lesson, and again, and is that if you believe that the path on which you are proceeding is right, then you have to keep doing that. And that's what I take as the lesson. I don't think the church reacts well to public criticism. But I think there comes a time when there needs to be public criticism, because working through the internal channels doesn't always result in change being made. And I would maintain that the 1978 revelation didn't just spring out of the blue. There were internal discussions. There were the threats of the BYU sports teams being boycotted. There were all sorts of other external factors. So I think, as with any change and with any movement, all of those things have to come together to create that sort of perfect storm that creates the change. And so, Ordain Women is going to continue to be a part of advocating for that change. We may we may do different things. We may work more collaboratively with other groups, but I do not see us going away, because the concerns that caused Ordain Women to be founded by Kate Calley are still there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. All right. Well, I kept you way too long. So, do you have any last thoughts before I let you go?
I guess my biggest thought is that I would hope that, rather than engaging in suppositions about what Ordain Women does and what Ordain Women does not do, that members would, we have a public website. Our website talks about what we do, what our mission is. It talks about our actions. It talks about the why of our actions. I would invite or maybe even challenge your listeners to spend a few minutes actually reading the profiles of the men and women who've posted profiles, because I think there's this tendency in the church to sort of paint with a very broad brush people who may think differently than we think, or who we think differently than we think. And I think if a little bit of time was spent actually going to the website and actually reading those profiles, that the conclusion would be that the brothers and sisters who have decided to be a part of Ordain Women are not, in some respects, very different than some other Mormons.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. Well, Bryndis Roberts, I really appreciate you spending so much time here on Gospel Tangents, and I hope you travel safely home.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Bryndis Roberts. I'd like to thank Bryndis for coming all the way to Utah, and I hope she had some safe travels. Thanks a lot, Bryndis. I really appreciate it. In our next conversation, we're going to talk to historian Mel Johnson. He's written a book on a early Mormon pioneer, John Pierce Hawley. We'll learn more about that.
Baptized in Missouri at the age of 11 in 1837, went through all the trials and tribulations. He and his older and younger brother were tasked with trying to save the family cattle herd. By the time it was all over, the young cowboys had 5 cows left. Their dad had been hiding out so he wouldn't be killed by their enemies.
I hope you enjoyed that short clip from our next interview. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please go to our patreon.com/gospeltangents and subscribe for just $5 a month. If you'd like a transcript of this, please click the yellow subscribe button at gospeltangents.com, and I'll send you this and all future transcripts. Also, if you'd like a paperback like we've got here, those are available at our website at amazon.com. Just do a search for Gospel Tangents. Please get all updates at our Facebook page at facebook.com/gospeltangents. We're also on Twitter at Gospel Tangents. You can also get transcripts individually at our website, gospeltangents.com/shop. Finally, make sure that you subscribe on our Apple Podcast page. Just do a quick search for Gospel Tangents there and give us a 5-star review while you're at it. Thanks again for listening. Your support helps create more Mormon history classes and podcasts such as this, and so I really appreciate you listening. Please share with your friends. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here you'll see some more of our great videos. Thanks again.